Welcome to part 2 of the Duster rebuild, if you want to call it that. If you watched the last video, you saw I got the car all torn apart here. The engine is just hanging by this brace up top. The suspension is ripped out. I went ahead and changed the oil pan to a rear sump oil pan. And then I went ahead and made these motor mounts on this QA1 tubular K-member. And then the last thing I did to end off the video was go ahead and throw a fresh coat of undercoating on these inner fenders here. In this video, I'm going to go ahead and install the rest of the suspension, which you can see sitting on the table right behind me here. Before I get to that though, I have to give a massive thank you to QA1 for once again coming on board with this thing. We did some double adjustable shocks all the way around earlier this year, and I've been running their tubular uppers and adjustable strut rods on the front of this thing for about 2 years now. I had a pretty decent torsion bar setup on this car, like I mentioned, some QA1 tubular stuff. I had bigger torsion bars and a disc brake kit up front, so it's pretty solid for what it was, but I've always wanted to do coilovers on this thing pretty much since I got the car, and now is the time to finally do that. QA1 offers 2 coilover conversion kits for A bodies here. The only difference between the two are the spindles. So they offer one with what they consider a drop spindle, which is 2 to 4 inches lower than the factory ride height, or you can get a spindle that goes as low as just 2 inches from the factory ride height. I really would like to get this car as low as I can, but just due to the wheels and tires that I'm running, I went ahead and opted to go to the spindles that only drop down to 2 inches. If I wanted to go with the drop spindles that were 2 to 4 inches, I would have had to run a 12-inch rotor, which isn't a huge deal, but the minimum size wheel I would have had to run is an 18-inch wheel. And personally, I don't think 18s would fit on this car aesthetically. This kit here looks pretty amazing, and I'm still kind of shocked that it's sitting here and about to go on this car. I've had it for about a month now, and just been storing it while I saved up and put together the rest of the pieces for the rest of the build here. But a quick rundown of what we're working with. Like I mentioned, these are the technically 0 to 2 inch spindles. So we'll crank the coilovers down as low as I can, and we'll see where it lands ride height wise. I'm not totally sure how it's going to look compared to what I had with the torsion bars, because I did have the torsion bars essentially resting on the bump stops. So we'll see where it goes from there. Got some billet tie rod sleeves, which I don't know why I'm excited for these, but these are pretty freaking nice. So that'll be cool to get on there and should be easy to adjust. Springs for the coilovers. These have a 400 spring rate, so we'll see how these work. And then obviously once I drive this thing and do some autocross with it, be able to tune in the coilovers themselves, which you can see right here. So these are like freaking jewelry, and I cannot wait to get them looking good right in there. Got the upper arms right here with the ball joints already in place, so that's pretty simple. The only thing I'll have to do with these is there's some heims that go in the end, so you can adjust them as well, so I'll have to get those set in place. But some nice tubular upper control arms, and then these lower control arms, which are freaking beefy, tubular as well, and then they are plated on the bottom side. Last 2 pieces for this kit include the K-member itself, and like I mentioned earlier, if you guys watched the previous video, you saw I had to cut off the motor mounts that were already on this thing because they were meant for a Mopar style engine, whereas I have an LS, so I went ahead and built those motor mounts there. And I had to go ahead and cut off the lower bump stop, I guess, bracket off the frame rail in order to get this triangle brace for the coilover to slide up on the outside of it. Other than having to cut off the lower bump stop brackets off the frame rails there, this entire kit is a bolt-on kit. It'll bolt right up to your Mopar A-body, whether that be a Duster, Dart, Demon, Valiant, and possibly even a Cuda. I'm not sure if this kit would work for an A-body Cuda, but it might there. And if you watched the last video as well, you'll recognize this piece here. This is the rack and pinion that comes with the kit as well. So not only am I converting this thing to coilovers, this will finally have a rack and pinion, which I have wanted for a long time. So I cannot wait to improve the steering on this. This rack here is out of a Fox Body Mustang. There's some bushings that have to go in between this, or I should say spacers that have to go in between this and the K-member. So when I go to bolt this on, I'll show you guys exactly how that goes on. And then there are some adapter fittings I had to get for the power steering line. Other than all the parts themselves, obviously this kit comes with every single nut and bolt needed to install this and get it to bolt onto your A body. Only thing that I had to get, which I guess is optional, were the bolts for the K members here. Just because I'm going through and replacing all this with fresh hardware, I figured might as well just toss some of these in as well. So if you're looking to put new K member bolts in, I think these will work for any Mopar, because I had an old one that I bought for the Charger when I built those frame rails, and it was the same size thread. So they're just 5/8 by 11. I went with one that are 2 inches long, put a washer on those, and that'll be just like the factory ones you see right here. My plan going forward on this is to get all the pieces assembled beforehand, so the upper, lower arms, and then go ahead, or coilovers as well, and then go ahead, bolt it all together with the K member on the ground, and then bolt it all up in the car as one unit. I'm probably not going to be able to, you know, lift the whole thing up there by myself, so I'll probably pop the arms, coilovers, spindles, all that off, do the K member, but this way I can get a good idea of how it all goes together, and it should be pretty simple from there. I'm going to go ahead and put together all of these rod ends. Just for the heck of it, go ahead, put some on this guy, because this is going to be riding in the bushings too. This is probably unnecessary, but rather be safe than sorry. Awesome. You know, I probably should have put these on first before putting the anti-seize on. Never claimed to be the smartest, but I can put a nut and bolt together. Upper and lower arms are both fully assembled now. I went ahead and threaded these out about 7 threads, which is equal to roughly a 1/2 inch. Like the instructions said, these joints on the end here should have about 2 threads showing, so that's what we got right there. Same process as putting the bottom ones on. Just got the cam bolts set in place. So this is all the hardware for these two. This is all the hardware I have left. The next step is going to be putting together the main piece of this whole thing, which is the coilovers. Time to assemble these coilovers once and for all here to get these things set on the car. I already got the lower arms set in place. That wasn't complicated at all. It's pretty straightforward. So now I'll go ahead, put some anti-seize all over these threads. It's like you're painting, but with evil silver paint. Spin this guy down. Now I'm just putting this collar all the way to the bottom. That way it gives me a little wiggle room when the spring goes on to get the top eyelet on and tighten that. But obviously this will get adjusted once it's in the car. And then the little set screw, which you can see right here, once I get the collar set in place and get this in the right position I want it, pops out, Loctite it, tighten it down, and that'll be set there. Next thing you want to do is make this bearing sandwich. Fill this with some anti-seize as well. This here, and drop this on for good as well. So yeah, that sits nicely on that little collar there. Now the tricky part here is getting this top hat set with this eyelet. So this is the way that the bolts go on once it goes through the K-member bracket. So you'll have this washer and the bolt head obviously on the outside of the bracket. Bracket will go right in there. Then you have this little spacer which butts up to the eyelet, vice versa on this side. So I'll show you that more in depth once we get to it. Get this top hat set in place. Bingo. Underneath, just like so. And then we'll go through and spin this eyelet on just like before. Just loosely installed for right now. I got anti-seize completely everywhere. We'll go through, tighten up this top eyelet. Once it's on the car, it'll be a little bit easier that way. So now that this is all together, let's go ahead and put it on the car and see what it looks like. this goes together is super simple. Take the bolt right here, gonna toss some anti-seize on that before I forget. Put the washer on the back side here. Gonna feed that through the rack first, and then there is this 3/4 inch billet spacer that goes in between the rack and the back side of the K-member. There are bushings on the back side of the rack, so this just spaces it out to what we need. There's that, and then up in this little pocket on the K-member, you slide in this washer and then the nylon locking nut. K-member and rack are fully bolted in, which means I could finally take that engine brace off so it is fully supported by the motor mounts I made right now. The ones on the block themselves are a little bit dirty, but motor mounts I made look good on there. Tossed some new hardware through that. This side over here worked out really good. That'll cover up the fittings as well, so it kind of tucks that underneath there. So that looks pretty good. I know this, I need to go through and repaint that, kind of touch up the top end of the block like I did to the bottom. So I'll get to that soon, but now that these two big pieces are in, it is time to get to the rest of the suspension, which is sitting on the bench right there. Gonna go ahead and install the top bolt first here, just so it can kind of hold the K-member in place while I then go through and get it situated with the lower arm. The way that this goes together is obviously you have your bolt right here with the washer that's going to go on the outside of the K-member bracket, and then you have these little tapered spacers which are going to go right in between the K-member bracket and the top of the shock head, like so, and it allows the Heim to tilt on a more aggressive angle with that little bevel there. I got both the cam bolts on the top of the upper arm all set in place. Also got the ball joint from the upper arm to the spindle set as well. So the top one gets torqued down to 55, bottom gets torqued down to 65. The final step here will be getting the tie rod set and then these bump steer spacers as well. QA1 sends two different bolts here for the outer tie rod going to the spindle. I'm going to be using the shorter bolt here because I'm running 15s on the car. If you're running 17s or anything bigger than that, like 18s or 19s, you're going to go ahead and use the bigger bolt here. They also send a plethora of spacers. This tapered one goes right on the bottom here. This is then going to go through the end of the tie rod, just like so, and then in between the tie rod and the spindle is where the other spacers will go. Tie rod installation is fairly simple. You get this billet tie rod sleeve with a Heim joint, a locking nut, and then obviously we have the threads on the end of the rack right there with the locking nut there. So toss some anti-seize on this. I have no idea where I want this to sit as of right now, because I'm not sure what the toe is looking like or if the input shaft on the rack is even centered at all. Taking the shorter bolt with the shorter tapered spacer, gonna go ahead and feed that through the outer tie rod. Take the bigger tapered spacer, place it on top, my 1/4 inch spacer, and it looks like this is going to have to come out as of right now anyway. Just like so. That'll be good for now. Toss the washer on, get this set in place. And the final step here is going to be torquing this down to 80 foot-pounds, and then that'll wrap up the front suspension install. That's going to go ahead and wrap it up for the full installation of the QA1 coilover kit for this thing. Just looking at that has me excited to drive this once again with the coilovers and the rack there. Can't wait to see a world of difference that this thing makes. But if you have a Mopar and don't want to do the full coilover setup on it. QA1 obviously has their torsion bar kit for this car, which I had a bunch of pieces from that on the old setup here. So if you want to go with something like that, that is the way to go. It's definitely a lot stronger and a lot better than the factory torsion bar if you don't want to convert everything to coilovers here. The last thing I'll have to do for the whole kit here is the steering linkage. As you can see, the input shaft for the rack hangs a decent amount lower than the steering column, so I'll have to go through and make something for that, but shouldn't be too difficult. I just got to see how far back I want the steering shaft to be, and then where I'm gonna have to kind of make this all work, or if I'm gonna have to put a Heim off the frame rail. Can't do that yet until the headers get here, and if those fit somehow, then I can go through and route that around it. I'm probably gonna go ahead and make a block off plate for this as well, because obviously I don't have a shock going through there anymore, so I'm not sure if I'm gonna weld something in there or make something that just bolts on. We will see there. With the QA1 kit comes all these pieces for the steering linkage. Get yourself a weld-on style steering coupler, as well as one of those chrome ones that was on the car. That is a bolt-on style, and then there's this bearing here, which would go in the end of the steering column. Now I'm not totally sure if I'm gonna end up needing this because I have the I did it column in the car, so I still have yet to figure that part out. And I don't think I'm gonna be using the weld-on style coupler, only because I had another one of these chrome ones here, so might as well make a match. Not a huge fan of the chrome, but it's what I had, so we will roll with that for now. Still a lot of work to do over these next few weeks, but getting that full kit assembled, the motor mounts made, oil pan installed, everything kind of buttoned up is definitely a good sigh of relief, because that was obviously a big piece there. So now it's just time to make all the little stuff fit and get this thing back together, and hopefully running and driving within the next week would be nice. That way it gives me a couple days to fine tune anything, or if something's wrong, I already messed something up with this power steering system or some wrong stuff. So cross my fingers I can get the new stuff here in time. But other than that, I think thus far we're looking pretty solid. So T-minus 12 days as of right now, and got a whole lot of boxes there still to put on this thing.